Welcome to the No Mom is an Island podcast. As moms, we often long for moments of being alone, but the truth is sometimes we feel downright lonely. The intention of this podcast is to show you that you aren't alone, that we all experience similar things along this mothering journey. If you enjoy this podcast, please stay tuned after the interview to hear of 3 easy ways you can help this podcast continue. Well, multitasking masters, whatever you are doing while you listen to this podcast, we hope you enjoy hearing the story of another mom. Today we welcome Eva. Hello, Eva. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. It's nice to talk to you. Thanks for letting me interview you.
My pleasure.
So why don't you tell us about your family?
Okay, so it's my husband and I, and then we have 3 children. Jack is almost 14, Solveig is almost 12, and Evie is 10.
Okay. And I think what your husband does is pretty unique and interesting. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, so he has just completed his first year as a professor at Huntington University. He's teaching film production. And we've lived in Indiana now for 1 year, and previously before that we lived in California for about 12 years.
All right, but one of those years in California, you didn't just live in California.
That's true. Our final, or almost final year of California, 14 months to be exact, our family took a road trip and visited all 50 states. And we did end up flying to Alaska and Hawaii. It was more economic that way and faster. And our family worked as a film crew together, interviewing kids in all 50 states who are trying to change the world and make it better. And we did a total of 75 interviews, and we're still in the process of editing all of those. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage.
I'm sure. Yeah. So what did your children think about that? Did they enjoy the process? Did they enjoy the film process of all that? Did any of them shine in that and say, like, that might be something that they want to do as an adult? What was their takeaway from that?
Yeah, the children were really good team players. And at first, my son was a bit caught up with missing his friends. But then I just talked to him heart to heart and said, dude, this is like a chance of a lifetime. Your friends aren't going anywhere. We'll go back to them. And we do all we can for you to stay in relationship with them throughout your life. And we just really need you. So he changed his heart and dove in. It was a learning curve for all of us. The earlier interviews were a bit choppier than the interviews after that. But we got into the process and became a pretty well-oiled machine. And the kids were just super impressive. They were such an asset because since they were kids, people just warm up to kids anyway.
Right.
So they helped us with making people feel comfortable, and they learned how to set up lights and sound, and they did the interviews of the kids we were interviewing. So it's a film project about kids by kids. And it was just a huge gift to be able to do that as a family.
That is really neat. And so what is your goal, your dream for the film when it's finished?
So our goal is we're going to do 2 film projects. One is a full-length documentary film about our family's process and how it changed us.
Yes.
And then the other is going to be a web series highlighting each of the youth change makers that we interviewed. And then we are all working on books to go along with each of the film projects.
Okay.
And we'd really love a child development study to figure out what makes kids want to help others, so that hopefully make a curriculum and make it available to schools or libraries or youth groups or clubs, kids clubs, where people can help foster more kids to be caring of others in their community and thinking about others more instead of being self-focused. And then we do have a dream. Like, honestly, I know this podcast isn't about this particularly, but
that's okay. I find it's really interesting. So it's quite all right. Go ahead and talk about it.
Okay. So anyway, we left on the road trip with not all the funding in place, but it came through, and it really blew open our imagination of someday we would love to do this internationally and interview kids around the globe who are trying to change the world. So that's a big, big dream, but I think it's totally possible because it was pretty challenging, but super amazing to see it all fall into place.
That is really neat. Do you have a website where if people were fascinated by this too, that they could check it out and watch your progress and then know when your projects are finished and have access to them?
Yeah, we have a Facebook page called 1 Year Road Trip, and that has a lot of photos on it that you can check out. It was kind of like the way that I documented our trip was through photos and little sentences. That I kept up with that. And Instagram, we have 1 Year Road Trip as well. And then the website is oneyearroadtrip.com.
I just wanted to, give people the ability to find that and let them follow you on that because, the podcast can go anywhere and then maybe there are people who are interested and would want to know more about it as it continues to develop.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you for telling all about that because I did follow it on Facebook and so I was curious about the other side of it now that I knew you were finished with it. So,
yeah.
All right. So why don't you give us your perspective on mothering and parenting?
Okay. So I believe that it is a huge gift, a huge challenge, and my biggest responsibility. And it's a constant call to serve, even when I'm exhausted, and super rewarding in the love and trust and safety that I get to share with my kids. And I'm regularly reminded of God's love for me and the patience that he has with me, and that I'm called to model that to my kids and my husband.
Right.
So I feel like it's really deepened my understanding a bit of God. So that's been a huge gift.
Yeah, I agree. And then what would you say is your overarching philosophy when it comes to parenting?
So I believe my philosophy is that parenting my kids, my goal is to raise compassionate humans who will have skills they need to eventually fly the nest successfully. And since my family are believers in Jesus Christ, we prioritize regular prayer throughout the day and regular devotional time where we read the Bible and discuss what it means as well as how we can apply it regularly to our everyday lives. And I believe that when we look at Jesus' example of how he loved people, he allowed himself to be interrupted by them, he healed them, he spent time with them, fed them, taught them, advised them, and prayed for them, just to name a few. I believe that it's my duty to model these things to my kids and teach them that they need to relate to people in these ways too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an amazing example that we're given by him. And, like when we look at the Bible and you may be like, well, there aren't a whole lot of like specific parenting examples, when you think of the traditional, like the parents and the child. But when we look at the way Jesus treated everybody who was near him and just what that should mean when we think about how he treats us and then how we and then treat the people he's entrusted to us, our children, it's a pretty amazing example.
Yeah, it is.
So what has been your favorite thing to teach your children or watch them learn?
So I couldn't choose just one.
That's
but,
okay.
A couple that stood out in my mind as I was thinking about this question was I love our times of reading and discussing the Bible readings that we do, and they just we just take time together with that, and they go really great directions, and I just love that the kids are engaging in that, and that's been a huge gift. We also love reading out loud or sharing stories and ideas. That's a lot of fun. This summer, I've been taking piano lessons along with my 3 kids, and that's been super fun because we work on some of the same songs together, and we do duets, and it's been hilarious. And it's a fun experience. So
definitely, that's fun.
Yeah, and I love being able to show my kids how to have fun, and I'm super goofy. I'm a real goofball. So I like having fun with the kids and making them laugh. I'm trying to teach them not to take themselves too seriously. So fun.
Yeah. Did you take piano lessons ever before in your life, or is this the first time?
It's my second time in my life. I took them from age 6 to 11,
okay.
But I kind of cheated in that I have a pretty good ear for music, so I didn't really learn how to read the music. I would just kind of trick my teacher into playing the song, and then I would try to memorize it just right there, and then practically that I remember hearing it. But now I'm really practicing hard reading the music.
That's so funny. So does one of your children or more than one seem to really love it too? Is anybody like really grabbing onto it?
Well, it's kind of still in the early stages, and so they get really frustrated, but they do I sit next to them and try to help them not feel like they're trying to figure it out all by themselves. So that takes a lot of time for me because I'm requiring all of us to do like half an hour of practice, but sometimes I'm doing like 2 hours of practice.
Right.
Which is playing. I love it, but I'm having to sit patiently with the kids so that they don't abandon and having to climb in or something. So it's good though. It'll get better, I think.
Yeah. That muscle memory as it grows, right?
Yep.
All right. So then what has been the other side? What's your least favorite thing to teach your children or watch them learn?
My biggest challenge is chores. I grew up, my mom, she was basically kind of raised in a boarding school, and so they had a huge list of chores, and so that seemed normal for her. So I had a huge list of chores, and we had a pretty good-sized house. And so it really impacted me in a kind of way where I thought, I will never make my kids do this. Because I hated it so much.
Right.
So I have a hard time, like I get them to help me, but I'm not really good at, I can't figure out how to make the list, and we don't do allowances and stuff. That sort of stuff just feels super intimidating to me. So I just ask that they pitch in as part of the family.
Right.
But I wish that they would be more self-motivated to like serve or stuff like that, or if they see the trash is full, to go empty it.
Right.
And stuff like that. So I mean, overall, it's fine, but sometimes I get impatient. I'm just like, guys, you need to help out.
Right.
So I'm just trying to find a balance.
Yeah, that balance is hard. Yeah, I run into that too. It's like more would get done if I was mean about it. Like super strict and mean about it. But I don't want it to be that way. And so then sometimes I wind up feeling frustrated because it seems really obvious that should have been done or helped with, and it wasn't. And I'll be like, well, like if somebody would just sweep the floor after dinner, and it's like, well, I didn't really like require somebody to do it, so of course nobody's gonna volunteer to do it, and so, but I know I agree. It's hard, the balance between overly strict and too loose and consistency and all of those things, and it's a pain.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and yet we both would agree we want our children to grow up to be competent adults, and so part of that is cleaning up after themselves. And so, I also know and I have the responsibility of making sure that they not only know how to do those things, but also know the necessity of being a contributor and not just a consumer. And so, like I have that weighing on my mind too. It's like making sure that I'm not just letting them slide because that's what's easier for me sometimes. And I don't know. Yeah. It's a hard one.
It is. Sometimes it's better than other times.
Yes.
Sometimes, what are you thinking? Why did you think that it was okay to do that?
Yes.
But it's a constant process. I keep trying to remind myself they've never been this age before, and they don't know what's supposed to be. I need to tell them. I need to give them a little more guidance.
Right.
Probably.
Right.
Yeah. And I try. I mean, I'm not just not letting them have to do anything.
Right. I know, but it's hard.
Yeah.
So what has been a high moment in parenting for you? Like a moment where you either thought, wow, I can do this, or I've got this, or something that just made your heart swell with, just the privilege of being their mom?
Yeah. I love spending time with my kids, and I keep anticipating when the time as they keep getting older, when they might not want to spend time with me anymore or as much. And I just love when my kids, I spend a lot of time. I spend as much time as I'm able to, but I love it when they keep asking me, can we spend time together? Can we do this together? We need a mommy and dog date, or I want you to read with me.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like I must be doing something right for them to want to come see.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we all have this like fear of that stereotypical teenage years where they really don't want to be with you anymore. And I don't know that that's always normal. My kids are, well, 3 of the 4 are teenagers, and the youngest who isn't might as well be. She acts, as much teenager as the rest of them. And I don't find that they don't want to spend time with me. Like nobody's really like trying to get out of that or shrugging that off. They still enjoy, they do enjoy other things too. And, they're happy doing other things, but they also don't ever like turn down hanging out together or doing something together. They still want to do that. So, and my 2 oldest are currently working at camp for the summer, and we try to go up on weekends, one day on the weekend to go see them. And, most of the time when we're there, they're still working like this, they're doing something still for camp. And so all of their staff friends are around too, and they still are just as willing to let me hug them for what I always laugh with them is like an obnoxious amount of time because I miss them so much. I'm like, you do know I'm going to hug you for an obnoxious amount of time, right? Because I miss them and they don't like try to avoid that or like push me off or anything like that. They let me just stand there and hug them. So, I do think it's possible to maintain. It changes as they get older, but I think it's still possible to maintain that desire to be together with your children.
Yeah, well, I remember even when I was in college and I'd come home from college to spend time with my parents, I I would ask my mom to tuck me in.
Yeah.
And I'd pull my back and talk and stuff like that. And I loved that. It was nice. And I held my dad's hand when we would get together even through college. I just stopped hands I would still do it every so often even now, but we don't see each other as much, and now I have kids holding my hand. Right. But I was pretty affectionate with my parents. So
yeah, I think it's possible, and I think, we watch as our children get older and need us less for some of the things that are still so fresh in our minds that they needed us for. But we just have to remember that they just need us in different ways that are still important, but are different, just that emotional support, that security, that I've got your back kind of support. And they still need that. And it just looks a little different than when they were little and needed their shoes tied and their drink poured and their coat zipped.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. So the other side of that is, can you think of a low moment in parenting where if you could have the sense of humor in the moment, you were like, my kids are going to need counseling, just something where you just were at your wit's end or just felt especially frustrated?
Yes. I don't do this often, but whenever I do it, my daughter says that I do it all the time, but it's not true. I can't remember the screamed at her, but sometimes I actually scream because, and I hate it whenever I do that, but most of the time when that happens is because she is yelling and I can't get her to hear me because she's being so loud. So then I just like overpower her and it's awful.
Yes.
And so she and I are very similar, and she's also really to my husband, and so she kind of pushes our buttons sometimes. But it's hard, and then so we'll blow up at her, but it doesn't happen that often. And something else that I really learned growing up was that it was important to admit when I was wrong.
Yes.
So that didn't happen a lot. My parents was growing up, and in order to regain the peace or warm feeling between me and my parents, I would have to say sorry even if it wasn't
right.
And so that made me determined that I'd never do that to my kids. My parents were awesome, but I guess the bad stuff does stick with you. I mean, it does. Probably the bad stuff I do to my kids is going to stick with them somewhat too. But I do apologize. I'm not afraid to say I'm sorry and, ask for forgiveness and stuff. So, and just kind of, whenever that blow up happens, we go and we cool down. And then later, before we go to bed, sometime before we go to bed, I'll just go in there and say, I know I blew it. Will you forgive me? I was wrong. And I try not to just justify it by listening. But sometimes I say, I just explain how I was feeling, that I was feeling like attacked and feeling like misunderstood and attacked or something like that. and that I wasn't being heard. And so I try to be really open and honest about how things are affecting me to hopefully show my kids that I'm human,
Right.
and that I up and, we're learning, I'm constantly learning, even though I'm an adult, still I'm learning and that sort of thing. So, and then we just snuggle a while and it's usually good.
Right.
So we don't hold grudges in our house. So
Right.
that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that, we are modeling. Obviously, as the parent, you want to be the one modeling good behavior, but we're all human, so good behavior doesn't always happen. And so I think it's important too that we model repentant hearts too, and like we model the humility to say I'm sorry and to go to the person and make it right. I think there's value in that, even though obviously we would rather model the other side of things. But there is value in us modeling that too.
Yeah, I agree.
Even though that's a little less fun.
It's true.
All right, what has been your biggest influence or influences in your parenting?
Well, definitely God, but then as far as human people, redundant there. My best friend's parents, as I was growing up, were highly influential in my life, and I really appreciated them listening to me and encouraging me. And my parents were pretty overwhelmed with my sister, who continues to make bad choices. So they were there when they were able to be there, mentally present, but it took a lot of energy to figure out how to manage. And so I would go over to my best friend's house, and her parents were therapists, and they were amazing. So I really appreciate. And then as an adult, living in California, being a young mom, I really appreciated this woman in my church named Linda, and she just was so good about, like, she would do this monthly mom's night out, and it would be at her house. She'd host it. She'd make us food. She'd like pamper us and just help us serve ourselves. And so it just kind of, regenerated us, or I don't know, just us.
Right.
She helped us recharge and encourage us. And it taught me that self-care is really important, and time with other women is really healthy, and I need to prioritize that. So I've gotten pretty good about making friends wherever I go and reaching out. I've just started like a women's Bible study, and I'm excited. I think it'll be an encouragement to everybody who's coming. And I'm trying to figure out how to possibly do a monthly mom's night out and host it at my house. There's a lot of young moms at the church that I attend. So to make that available, because I think it's really easy to elect ourselves sometimes.
Right. Yeah, I feel strongly about, the idea of us sharing lives and, and taking care of each other and having the opportunities to help each other. And one of the things my kids are close together, and when they were young, it was overwhelming to have that many young at one time, and just the idea of how difficult it was to get a break and to have that time out. And so, but I love the idea, you mimicking what was such a gift to you being the mom invited into this other woman's house. And now, as your kids get older and you have the opportunity to do that for others. And I just think that's a pattern we need to constantly be encouraging, and not adopt the attitude it's like, well, I'm out of that, so now I don't need to deal with that anymore. It's like, no, like, let's offer the relief that we so needed when we were in that stage. So I think that's really a neat idea. So that's great.
Yeah, I tried to offer, I tried to offer it to the moms in the church that my girls could come and play if they had stuff they needed to get done in their house. But because I have to work part-time, and it's a regular thing that I could go and do on a regular day. But nobody took us up on it.
No.
But that might be partly because we're still new in town. And
maybe.
It's kind of the town that we live in now. It's like generations and generations of people live here. And so they have lots and lots of family to depend on.
Okay.
But when I lived in California, there were a lot of transplants. And so friends really had to depend on each other. And we became each other and just, helped each other that way.
All right. So what do? You kind of mentioned this about when your kids were young and you were in California and you went to this mom's night out group. But so what do you do now for self-care? How do you make time and take time for yourself?
So at this stage of life, my oldest is able to hold down the fort for several hours at a time. And so my husband and I are able to get out together And sometimes it's just for a long walk, and sometimes it's for dinner or something like that. And that's a huge gift. I also really prioritize meeting up with other women for walks in the morning or in the afternoon. And we either walk or we go exercise together somehow. And I also prioritize like meeting up with other women for Bible study or prayer or something like that. And this past spring, I got the opportunity to go on my first silent retreat, and it was just amazing. Now I'm really hoping and planning to do that at least annually. And it's because it gave me the space to discover parts of myself I didn't even know existed. And I started writing poetry, and I started drawing, and it was just like so cool how like just time alone with God was, I don't know, made me more of a co-creator with him sort of thing.
Okay.
And it was pretty. And then I also have taken opportunities to take a class past year, and that was it was good for me, my personal growth. And I mentioned earlier that I'm taking piano lessons, so I'm trying to continue to grow as a person,
right,
as a mom, or not just as a wife, but as a person.
right.
So that's been fun, and I try to do art a little bit each month. I'm just super blessed that my husband is really supportive of me taking advantage of these opportunities. So that's been a huge gift.
Yeah, that's really neat. All right, the next thing is a favorite life hack. So this is something that makes your life faster, easier, cheaper, anything in that category. Something you've figured out that works for your family that makes some aspect of your life easier.
Okay. So our family is not embarrassed to shop at Goodwill or other thrift stores. And I think we've done a good job of explaining to the kids why that's a good idea, and because they're still growing, and they're growing fast, so it tends to spend a lot of money on them.
Yes.
And we can find, like, we think of it as treasure hunting, so we can find some really decent things at thrift stores. So that helps make life a little cheaper. We also don't have a TV, so they can't be influenced by commercials telling them what they need to buy and stuff like that.
Right.
So that's been a good thing. As far as something making it a little easier, just being open with our kids in our conversations and communicating about everything. This might not be exactly what you're looking for, but it popped into my head whenever I was thinking about this question for some reason. But when we lived in California, we lived near this couple who were marriage and family therapists at Fuller and at Pepperdine University. And they really encouraged us to start like conversations about sex early in our lives, and like even recommended like 5 years old, because the kids aren't embarrassed about anything then, and then it can just be like a going conversation, and like hearing it first from somebody who has no idea and who's making a joke about it and that sort of thing. And it just kind of also encouraged our kids it showed our kids that we're willing to talk with them about anything, and that nothing's off limits. I mean, we'll be careful, probably, we'll be careful the way that we talk about things, but that they should never be afraid to ask us about anything.
Right.
So that's like creating that openness has been a real plus for our family.
Yeah. And
I mean, my son just is pretty open about like struggles that he's having as growing up as a adolescent and that sort of thing. And I'm just grateful that he's not embarrassed to talk to us about stuff. And we just are really careful not to shame or do anything that would cut that communication off. And then we just encourage each other to pray for each other. And we say, we're praying for you, and we do pray for them. And they ask us to pray for them. And so, I don't know, that's been good.
Yeah, that's really neat. All right, what would you give as a word of encouragement to that weary mom out there?
So there are definitely seasons of parenting that seem super long and difficult and are consuming and don't seem like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but there is a light, and there are other seasons that will come along that are a little easier. I would advise anybody to make sure that you take care of yourself, spiritually, emotionally, physically. It'll make you a better parent. If you don't neglect yourself, it'll give you more energy. You won't be struggling as much to comparing yourself. I sometimes fall into that trap of comparing myself with others, but I just encourage people to don't waste time comparing yourself.
Right.
Find a community, and if you can't find one, start one. Put yourself out there and start it, because it's needed. Everybody needs community, and it'll make the journey a lot more sweet whenever you know you're not going it alone.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much. It was great to talk to you and hear about your family and your parenting. So thank you for letting me interview you. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for taking the time and getting in touch with me.
No, it was great to talk to you again.
Thanks.
All right, you take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on the No Mom is an Island podcast. We hope that it was an encouragement to you wherever you are in your mothering journey. If you would like to share your story or would like to see something added to our interviews, please contact us at nomomisanisland@gmail.com or send us a message on Facebook or Instagram. Also, if you have enjoyed listening to the stories of other moms, there are 3 ways you can help this podcast to thrive. You can share the episodes with family and friends on Facebook or Instagram. You can leave a rating and review for the podcast on iTunes or Podbean. This helps boost the podcast's visibility. And you can consider contributing to the monthly expenses of hosting this podcast by going to the crowdfunding link in the episode description. Thank you.